AV in your ears, that's Ambush Vid, giving you this audio visual down the most interesting street in the world. With my boy Steve, Fascination Street, you already know. Let's get it when you whip in the Fascination Street. What do you...
So bye, Miss...
Hi, this is Don McClain, and you are listening to Fascination Street Podcast.
It was dry.
Yeah, AV in your ears, that's Ambush Vid, giving you this audio visual down the most interesting street in the world. With my boy Steve, Fascination Street, you already know. Let's get it when you whip in the Fascination Street. What do you...
Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with musician Ollee Owens. No relation, I don't think. In this episode, we get to know Ollee and where she grew up in Canada and why she decided to become a musician. She's a singer-songwriter who has recently released her second album. It is called Nowhere to Hide. It came out in 2024. There's 11 tracks on it, and they are amazing. There's some of those Muscle Shoals studio musicians on it, some super famous ones. It's produced by a Nashville legend and really highlights Ollee's songwriting capabilities and her vocal range. In this episode, she does let me play my favorite song off the album. It's called My Man, and you guessed it, she wrote it about her man. Also in this episode, along the way, we talk about the importance of setting some dreams aside to take care of some more immediate and pressing matters, and also the importance of going back to it and chasing that dream again. I really enjoyed talking to Ollee, and I think you're going to enjoy this album. Again, the 2024 album, it's called Nowhere to Hide. It's 11 tracks, and this is my conversation with Canadian singer-songwriter Ollee Owens.
Prepare to be fascinated. Prepare to be fascinated. Prepare to be fascinated.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Ollee Owens. How you doing today?
I am doing really well, thank you.
Listeners, streetwalkers, if you will, I would love to say that Ollee and I are not related, but we'll never know. Ollee, where were you born and raised? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a small farming community in southern Manitoba called New Bothwell. Lots of agriculture, different kinds of farms around where we grew up. A lot of good people.
So you're Canadian.
Yes.
How long have you been Canadian? Just kidding. How many generations of Canadian are you? Like, are you Canadian from forever?
Let me see. How far can we go back? My great-grandparents on my mother's side immigrated from first Europe, then they went down to South America, and then they started farming. Oh, sorry, that's my father's side. So they were in Europe, then they emigrated to South America, and then they emigrated to the farming community in southern Manitoba. And on my mom's side, my great-grandmother came over from England. My other great-grandparents came from Poland and Ukraine. All farmers, though, so a lot of agriculture in that background there.
That's pretty impressive that somehow in all of that traveling to this side of the world, nobody lived in America?
No.
That's so
Nobody
weird.
lived in America.
That's weird, says the American.
They all kind of came from other places and straight into Canada. So,
is Owens your maiden name or your husband's name, or what is Owens?
Owens comes from my grandfather on my mother's side. And so for me, the artist's name was inspired and derived from both of my grandparents on my mother's side. So my grandmother is Ollee, and my grandfather has Owens in his name. They played a very key role in my early years, very important role. And so I really wanted to honor them as an artist and carry forth, the spirit of who they both were. And so that's where Ollee Owens is derived from.
So these were your grandparents?
Yes.
Would it be too much of prying to find out how exactly they were so important in your life? You were very specific about that, so I want to hit on it.
Yeah. So my parents were quite young when they they had me. And so my grandparents took on a caregiving role for the first, 4 years of my life. And so I spent a lot of time with my grandparents as my parents were kind of figuring things out between themselves. And so, that really formed a strong bond with them, to the point where I think, my parents being so young, they weren't sure if they were going to keep me around or if they were going to pass me along to another family. And my grandparents stepped in and said, you know what, we're going to support you, which was not very common in those days. I feel like, sometimes it was just make it all go away. But my grandparents didn't do that. They stepped in and they stepped up to the plate, and we had a really strong bond, the three of us.
Very cool. I love that. I was asking because a friend of mine, he has a podcast which focuses on the importance of grandparents. This is going to sound weird, but I'm always kind of, whenever I'm talking to somebody, I'm just always keeping one ear out to see if there is a grandparent involvement that might make that guest a good fit for that other dude's show.
Yeah.
Okay, so Manitoba, it's a farming community. It's all agriculture mostly and things. Did you grow up on a farm?
Did not grow up on the farm. I grew up in town, but my grandparents had a farm about, less than a mile out of town. And so, we'd often ride our bikes over there. We spent a lot of time on the farm. And then later on in my late teens, my father took over the farm. So we moved to the farm a little bit later on. But I spent a lot of my childhood on the farm, with my other set of grandparents. My grandfather was a grain farmer and a pig farmer. So there's also a lot of like chicken, pig, and dairy farms around where we lived as well.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, lots of good food. Lots of good homegrown sort of food growing up for sure. Yeah.
How come you didn't become a farmer?
Music called to me louder than farming did. Let's just put it that way.
Well, that's a great answer. When did music call to you? When did you know? Like, I've heard stories that you were, I don't know, like 5 years old when you realized the connection, but I want to hear it from you.
Sure. Yeah. So it was always a part of my life. I mean, my dad was a musician. He played in bands, on the weekends and stuff. Both my parents were huge music lovers. My mom was, Elvis and Beatles, and my dad loved, classic Southern rock country. And then there was gospel music and, a lot of music in the house all the time. I was very young. I was probably 5 when I first, we grew up going to church. So in that environment, there's opportunities, right, to sing and do that kind of thing. And I think, I would be given little solo parts there. And then when I went to school, I was also given parts in the spring concerts and the Christmas concerts and stuff. And I think really what it was is my parents started out young and it was a bit rocky. And when I sang, it affected people in a very positive way. It was something I had inside of me, and it was kind of a really powerful thing from very young on, like as far back as I can remember, when I would be able to sing for people. It was satisfying for me and it brought joy to me, but I could tell it was bringing joy to other people. And so I had a very deep connection with music at a young age. And then even through the ups and downs, growing up, music became a bit of a lifeline, whether it was certain artists, but also where I started to write music. I was quite young when I started writing my own songs. The melodies were just there and I would process things and write about what I was experiencing in the world. And yeah, so it started as far back as I can remember, really, and has always been a really big part of my life.
Okay, you've said it 2 or 3 times, and I'm going to have to address it. You keep saying about, but you're from Canada, so you're supposed to say a boot.
Oh, that's funny. Is that how we usually say it? I don't know.
Yes, all of you guys say a boot.
That's funny. Well, I guess not me.
Yeah, not you.
I have been told by some friends down there, I don't necessarily sound as Canadian as some of the other people they know, but I don't know why that is.
Yeah, you sound, let's say, less Canadian than Tom Green, more Canadian than Michael J. Fox. How's that?
Okay, well, there we go.
And more Canadian than Shania Twain.
Yeah.
Okay, so you grew up with music being a really big force in your life. Do you play any instruments?
I do. I play guitar and I play a little bit of piano. I write on the piano sometimes just to challenge myself, because when I'm playing piano, I'm playing in different keys and stuff. And then when I'm playing guitar, I kind of, gravitate towards my favorite keys. So depending on what's going on in my head in terms of melody and stuff, I'll go between the two. But guitar is the main instrument besides my voice that I play.
So you said you started writing songs when you were quite young.
Mm-hmm.
Now, usually when people say that, typically it means that they were writing lyrics, almost
Mm-hmm.
poetry.
Mm-hmm.
But you specifically mentioned melodies. How did you figure out how to even process melodies? Because I don't know how young you were, but as a youngster, you hear music and you're like, oh, cool, that's a thing that I could never do because I'm a little person. But when did you figure out that you could develop melodies and put certain cadences together musically?
Oh man, I think I started kind of, because I journaled a lot. I had all these little notebooks and I would write. So I started kind of the journaling process when I was quite young, like 7 or 8. And I think part of it was because my dad was a musician. So I watched him. He was a guitar player. So he'd play chords and sing. And that was a common occurrence in the house. And so for me, it didn't seem odd that I could do it too. Cause I, initially I was like, I want to be like my dad. I want to play guitar. I want to do that. And so I think because I was watching that, it didn't seem too far away from what I could do. And so I just kind of started doing it. Now I picked up the guitar officially at age 12. And that's when I really started like further developing, the songwriting, because I was learning the chords and then I could play with the chords and the lyric together. But I think a big part of it was because it was all around us, and then my brother also took up the guitar a year before I did. And so he was playing guitar. And so he and I would do a lot of going back and forth where he'd be playing guitar and I'd be coming up with things. And, so we would be kind of going back and forth. That little journey of discovery into writing kind of happened together.
Your brother, is he older or younger?
He's younger. He's 2 years younger than me.
Sounds like you guys had a real Donnie and Marie thing going on there.
Yeah, I think even at one point, we did the little family band thing for a while and a lot of singing together, playing music together. That was a thread that kept us kind of together during those years for sure.
Much like you, I grew up, music was a big part of my house. My dad played guitar and sang in rock and roll bands and
Mm-hmm.
heavy metal bands as I got older. Eventually he switched to bass, but he always sang. And I was quite young also when I realized that I am not musically inclined at all.
Mm.
I think it was my dad used to say that some people can't carry a tune in a bucket, and that would be me. He didn't say that about me. I don't think. He might have, but I don't. But he used to say that about, let's just say, people, and I guess I'm people. So I could never play any instrument. I could never, sing. I don't have any. I love music. I listen to all kinds of music. A lot of people say they listen to all the genres, but I really do.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been jealous that I don't have any musical abilities. How old were you when you realized that it wasn't just a passing fad with your musical capabilities, but it was unmistakable? It was undeniable. Like there was this thing in you that just wouldn't rest. How old were you when you figured that part out? So sorry it took me so long to get to that question. Good God.
No, that's a great question. I would say before I was 10 years old, I just knew. It was like there was just that part of me I knew was unique. And it was such a deep part of me by that point. By the time I picked up the guitar at 12, I was like, I'm going to do this. Like, this is what I've been made to do, and I actually quit guitar about 2 weeks later because my fingers hurt so bad. And then I was 13. I'm like, you know what? I got to learn to play this thing because this is what I'm meant to do, And so I pushed through. And I remember at one point I had joined this little band. I must have been about 14 or 15. And there was a band in our town that would go over and play at the next town over once a week. And I'm like, I wanted to be in the band. But to be in the band, they were playing songs that had the F chord in them, And I'm like, the F chord's so hard. I don't know if I can do this. And I was like, no, I want to do this. I want to be part of this. And I remember working so hard to get that F chord, so I could play the songs. And it was really young. I just knew that it was something that, not even just that I just wanted to do, but I needed to do. It was just something that was there. It's kind of hard to explain.
So when I was young, my dad was trying to teach me to play guitar. Kind of like you said you quit after about 2 weeks. I don't think I lasted quite 2 weeks. It was more about 30 minutes because I was pushing as hard as I could on the strings, and my dad was like, harder. You have to push it harder. And I was like, but it hurts. And he was like, I know. And I was like, no, thanks. And then I just quit.
I remember the first lick I learned was Free Falling by Tom Petty. It's a D chord and you suspend the D. And I was like, this sounds just like Tom Petty. This is awesome. I love this. And it just like kept me going to keep learning more chords and stuff. And I remember having there was like a little sheet that shows you all the chords, and I would just go through and I'd, be working on it and make up little songs. And it was a grind, but I'm glad I pushed through it.
I love it. I'm glad you did too.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Karen Silkwood had a purpose. She was headed to a crucial meeting that would blow the whistle on the billion-dollar nuclear corporation she worked for. Instead, she died in a concrete culvert on a dark, desolate stretch of highway just outside of Crescent, Oklahoma. To discredit her, authorities and the institution Karen sought to expose called her nothing more than an emotionally disturbed and sexually promiscuous drug abuser. But in her death, she became a martyr for feminism, environmentalism, and pro-labor movements. From the creators of Gone Cold, Texas True Crime comes Silkwood, a story that remains one of the most explosive conspiracies in 20th century America and became the inspiration for a critically acclaimed movie. Silkwood dives deep into 28-year-old whistleblower Karen Silkwood, her relentless fight for truth, and the chilling events that followed. Betrayal, danger, and a mysterious unsolved death that still haunts the nation 5 decades later. Seeking justice, Karen went up against a corporate Goliath and paid the ultimate price. With no known witnesses, what happened to Karen Silkwood on that cold November night? Was it an accident? Was she silenced for knowing too much? Or something far more sinister? In a world where profits are placed above safety, Silkwood takes you inside a gripping true tale of corporate greed, government cover-ups, and the deadly secrets inside a nuclear industry titan. Don't miss this eye-opening journey into one of the most powerful stories of our time. Find Silkwood on your favorite podcast platform and hit that subscribe button now. Some secrets are too dangerous to stay hidden.
Let's get back into it.
You mentioned Tom Petty. Let's talk about some of your influences. I don't know if Tom is one of them, but let's talk about your influences because your music is a bit eclectic, and I would almost say it's hard to define. Tell me who some of your influences are.
As I mentioned earlier, growing up, Mom listened to Elvis and the Beatles, and Dad was in the Southern rock kind of country vein. And my mom kind of also listened to some kind of not swing, but, like the old, like sentimental journey. Like my grandfather was really into that music. And then in my teens, my brother and I, on our journey of discovery into music, we discovered the Delta blues, soul, and gospel sort of singers. That was a really huge moment for me in particular. And I think, the nature of that music, the nature of blues, because our situation was, there was challenges growing up. There was just such an emotional intensity and an acknowledgement of hard things and all these things wrapped up into this music that it just grabbed onto me. As well as, again, kind of moving more into junior high and high school, I discovered Bob Dylan. And of course, lyrically and songwriting, that was just a feast for the ears and eyes. And there was Bob Dylan, and then that led to, the band, and a lot of that music combined with the blues and all of that really kind of influenced me. There was another artist, they're considered more Americana, but Buddy and Julie Miller. Buddy played with Emmylou Harris for years. But Julie's writing in particular kind of impacted me as well pretty strongly during that time. She wrote from a real honest place and wrote about real life struggles. And, so all of these collectively combined became kind of my lifeline, in terms of just really influencing, I think, my creative and my writing, but also just me as a person during that time. I just found a voice in a lot of that music, and it really impacted me.
That makes sense. So I was listening to your music and I was like, it's not quite country. And then I was like, okay, well, there's some blues in there. There's a lot of blues in there, but it's not quite just blues. It's not quite country and blues by itself. So the Southern rock piece, I think that was the piece that I was missing.
Yeah.
To put all those three things together. How do you describe your music? Like if you genre it, what is it?
That's been a journey for me as an artist. I took a hiatus for 15 years, came back to it in 2015. It's been a bit of a journey of discovery. So initially, I was taking all these collective influences, right? And I'm trying to figure out, okay, we know, what is this going to be? As an artist, am I going to really put myself in a real narrow genre? Or am I going to explore a little bit? So my first record, 2022, I would say is a bit more of a wider lane in terms of exploring blues, rock, soul, a little bit of that Southern rock influence. Etta James, Mavis Staples, those are also really big influences in my life. It's been a bit of a journey of discovery and really kind of finding, kind of that lane that I feel I can really express myself in. And so that record I feel like was a little wider, and this brand new record I've just released, I feel like we've even settled into the lane a little bit more, where the lane's a little bit closer together, and especially with the blues and the bit of that soulful edge, and, there's still a little bit of rock in there. I love to sing a lot of things. I love all the influences that I've had over my lifetime. But again, really kind of settling into more blues and blues influence, soul influenced, I feel like there's a certain level of emotional intensity that who I am as an artist, I'm free to express within the context of that. That's probably the best way I can describe it. It wasn't like, I'm going to be a country singer, I'm going to be this. Like it's been a bit of a journey to find that lane.
Well done. I'm glad you found it, because believe me, you did find it. You're nailing. This new album is amazing. The first album, ladies and gentlemen, she mentioned that was in 2022. It was her debut album. It was titled Cannot Be Unheard. You really can see the growth and the, like you said, the narrowing of the lane from that first album in 2022 to this new album in 2024. The new album is called Nowhere to Hide. You mentioned you took 15 years off of pursuing music.
Yeah.
Do you want to go into why?
Sure. I met the love of my life very young. We got married. We have 3 beautiful daughters, and our middle daughter was born with a cognitive delay. And so at that time, when it became apparent, because it wasn't initially apparent, by the time she was 2.5 years old, she had a formal diagnosis. My husband and I had met around music. He's a drummer, and so we'd played music prior to that. But when I realized the depth and degree of her needs, combined with having 2 other beautiful daughters on either side of her, I made a decision during that time to set aside my musical aspirations and really focus on being present and engaged for my daughters. And so we were fortunate in our city to have incredible supports for my daughter, including in-home therapists coming to our house. And I just really wanted to be there, and I wanted to make sure that my other daughters, because of the needs of my middle daughter, they weren't suffering by me also pursuing a career over and above all of it. And so I chose to set things aside and focus on my girls. No regrets on that front. It's definitely had its challenges. I mean, our daughter is an incredibly wonderful human being. She loves classic rock and big trucks and all sorts of, blues and live music and all that kind of stuff. And I've learned a lot from her during that time. For about a decade, I did do some music therapy. I volunteered as a music therapist in her classroom. Obviously it was very recreational music therapy. I always say that because I didn't have the formal training, but I was able to take my love for music and have a beautiful outlet with her classmates for about a decade. And then in 2015, a friend of ours moved to town. He's another great musician up here. Actually, he's from my hometown, and I used to babysit him. He moved to our city, and he's like, hey, you should come out to the Blues Can Jam, and I was like, man, I haven't done that for so many years. I don't know. And, finally he convinced me to pop in one day, and there's a guy running the jam. His name's Bill Dowie. He's passed on now, but he's kind of a local legend up here. And I met Bill, and I went up and got on that stage, and I think we sang Deep Ellum Blues and JJ Cale, The Breeze. We picked some easy jamming songs, and it was just a real beautiful moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about how great it is to be with people and do music. One thing led to another. I started getting connected to some people locally and kind of stumbled my way kind of back into doing what I'm doing now. So it's been an interesting journey. I actually didn't think I'd get back into music. I wasn't certain of that when I decided to take the break. So it's been something that every day I wake up and I'm like, wow, I get to do this. And I can't believe it. It's just, such an incredible privilege, I feel, to be able to share music with people.
You mentioned music therapy, and you were quick to point out that you didn't have any formal training in it. Let's talk about the music therapy that you did do. Mm-hmm. How did that take shape? In what form?
It kind of started out because, as parents, you volunteer in your kids' classrooms, right? So field trips and all that kind of stuff. And then I just, had a chat with the teacher, said, hey, I'm a musician. Like, would it be helpful to come in and maybe play some music with the kids? And she was like, that would be incredible if you could do that. And so it kind of just started from there. And so as my daughter moved from classroom to the next classroom and the next teacher, I just kind of followed her and did it. And so basically I'd come into the class and, I had prepared a bunch of songs that were easy, very interactive songs, right? So it would require participation from the students. Sometimes I bring in little things for them to contribute. They each pick like a little percussive instrument and we'd all sing together. It was really beautiful, because when I'd start with them at the beginning of the year, some kids didn't even want to participate. A lot of them, because everybody was at a different point, it's not a different point, but everybody had a different type of challenge, that they were coming into the classroom with. And it was really cool to see, by the end of the year, ones that weren't participating in the beginning, I'd walk in the room and they'd come and sit down because they knew what was coming and were eager to participate. And, just hearing from the teachers, the difference it was making for them, having this added support in their classroom. It was a wonderful way. Even though I wasn't doing music formally, it was a wonderful way to contribute and still have an outlet for my passion of connecting, with people. Really special time.
Now, you said you did this for about a decade, mm-hmm. and primarily it was, you're just following your child around to her different classes. But I would imagine that along the way, there was a bunch of kids that you got to interact with more than just the one class, right? Over the course of the 10 years, were you able to notice what effect you had on some of these kids, like the impact that what you did changed any part of their life?
I mean, kids spend a lot of time at school. So I think because my daughter was in the same school, so yeah, you would see kind of as these kids grew up, you could see the difference it was making because you build a relationship with them. It's not just that you're there once a week, you're doing the music, but yeah, I think nonverbal kids becoming more verbal, more interactive, coming out of their shell a bit more. The social development is a huge piece of the IPP programs that each child will have for the year. So it's like, building up their social skill sets, being able to interact with other people. And so I think what I was contributing to the classrooms would most definitely have contributed to that in terms of them building up that social skill set, which really helped the teacher achieve the goals that were set out for many of these children. So it really was an honor to be a part of that. It's a nice little bright light in that season of my life for sure.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you didn't know when you took that hiatus for 15 years, you didn't know if you were ever going to come back to music. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I really like to ask the artists that I talk to is, why didn't you give up? Like, you had a perfect opportunity after taking 15 years basically off. Mm-hmm. You had a perfect opportunity to just quit. How come you didn't?
Well, if I go kind of full circle back to earlier in our conversation, there was something in my spirit and my heart knowing that this is what I was made to do. I think revisiting, and even again, I remember being so nervous going to that first little jam that my friend invited me to, going, what am I doing? This is crazy. Why would I even go? This is not where I'm supposed to be. But the minute I got on that stage and sang like those two songs and experienced the positive impact of it and the energy and the exchange of what it was doing for people, I think it really sparked something in me where I was like, That's right. I think what it did was it was like, wow, if I could do this and hopefully make a little difference in somebody's life, even if it's just for 5 minutes in a song, this idea of being a part of the solution in this world. And I'm not saying that it's the answer, but there's such a power in music and its ability to help us get through stuff. And I think for me, that was the catalyst. Like I remembered and I realized, I'm like, wow, I really feel like if I could do this, I would do it. And even at that point, I didn't think I'd be getting into it. Like this was just a simple little show up at a jam. My husband is an incredible supporter of what I'm doing. And it's like he never let go of that, right? Even from the first, how we met. He met me in a group of people before we actually met. We were in this group where we were singing and he heard me singing. He didn't know me. He'd never met me. But he heard it and he was like, what is that? Who is that? And it was just this kind of thing that, he actually said, like, you should really think about this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, look at our life. Like, I can't do this. This isn't in the cards for me. And he was really the one who just said, look, we'll figure it out. I'll support you. I don't know what we need to do, but I want to be there. And I feel like the world needs to experience what you have. And I'm like, okay, like I was reluctant at first, but I did. I mean, I had songs and the music was still there. It would never left. And so that's been a huge part of me really kind of coming back into this was his support coupled with the opportunity to share with people.
Gotcha.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is the podcast where we get to talk to other grandfathers and figure out what they are doing to make their relationships grow and become meaningful. I also talk to experts on mental health, addiction, career advice, writing books, and many other topics. If you're not a grandfather, that's perfectly okay. Much of what we talk about are tips and tricks that you can use in your everyday relationships as well. So you're more than welcome to come on in and join us. The Cool Grandpa Podcast can be found on all major podcast hosting platforms, as well as cool-grandpa.us. That's cool-grandpa.us. Come in, kick up your feet, and join us as we figure out this role of grandfather together. Now, Steve, why don't you hit us again with another fascinating conversation?
Let's get back into it.
You have 3 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
This question would apply whether it was sons or daughters, but I think it might apply just a little bit more because it's daughters. How important is it to you for your kids to see you put your dream on hold for a very good reason, but then not to give up, like to continue to chase your dream when the timing was right? How important is it for your daughters to see that example?
I think it's very important for them to see it. And I think also in light of the fact that my story as a whole, my beginnings were riddled with challenges. So there was overcoming that. And then we had our beautiful family. And of course, there's challenges in that. And then for me to be able to take all these things and turn it into something hopefully positive and good for people who get to receive what it is that we're creating and writing. And I think for the girls, I don't want them to ever feel like it's too late or you're too old or you're too this or you're too that, because I feel like those voices are out there and they're out there really strong sometimes. And if I can, in a small way, be a living example of what it means to rise up out of adversity and shine, if I can be that example, I really hope that they feel like there's nothing they can't do themselves when they come up against challenges or seeming obstacles in their life. That's my hope.
Well, I think that is a wonderful example to set for any kids, but specifically, I think daughters. These days, I feel like daughters need more of an example of that don't quit and chase your dreams kind of a thing. We're going to talk about your new album. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the first album, debut album, back in 2022 was called Cannot Be Unheard. But this new album, 2024, it is called Nowhere to Hide. Now, the title track, I think it's the first one, is called Nowhere to Hide, right? How come it's not called Trouble? And once you hear the song, ladies and gentlemen, you'll understand why I'm asking. Why isn't it called Trouble?
It just seems so on the nose to call it Trouble. You know, I mean, how many songs are called Trouble?
All of them. Yeah.
It's actually funny you asked that because I was talking with my co-writer about it. It's like, what do we call this? Like, I mean, obviously we could call it Trouble, but then we're like, but all these other songs are called Trouble. And then the line Nowhere to Hide caught me. It kind of sums up what the song's talking about, right? Like, there's trouble everywhere. No matter where you go, we can't hide from it. It's everywhere. The song itself, like, it acknowledges the trouble, but there's hope because there's this element of us coming together and this element of, you know, rediscovering forgotten ways of resourcefulness. Or, you know, there's this element of like, well, there's trouble, but we're resilient and we're strong. You know, we have choices. We can stand up against this. So there might be nowhere to hide, but it doesn't mean trouble has to get us down, you know? And so I think that concept of kind of standing up in the face of adversity and unapologetically going, yeah, I know, I see you over there, but you know what? You're not getting me down today, you know? And I think with all the goings on around us, we can feel overwhelmed and we can feel weighed down. But again, it's so important to come together as much as we can, even, you know, choosing love, whether we agree with each other or not on things, you know, and these days there's a lot of that going on, but it doesn't mean we can't still make a choice to connect and stand together and in the face of it all. So that's kind of where that came from.
I love it. Who produced this album?
Bobby Blazier. He's based in Nashville. I've worked with Bobby since 2020. He's an amazing, amazing man. He's been around for a while, 30 plus years in Nashville. Is just a fantastic human being. He really caught my vision. He understood who I am and what my desire as an artist to create music that's meaningful and with a message. And he just brought the right people together. It was just so wonderful working with him. And it has been since the very day I met him. You know, we had a real synergy.
Nice. Why Nashville? You live in Canada. That's pretty far from Nashville.
It is pretty far from Nashville. You know, part of that, I wanted to work kind of internationally. Well, I mean, Nashville's the music city. And not that there's not music anywhere else.
I was going to say, how dare you?
But I think, you know, especially for me wanting to build kind of an international sort of presence, I felt like working outside of Canada and a place like Nashville, which is well known, there was an element of that. But also, it's interesting because I feel like Nashville and even like kind of the South in general, it's actually, ironically enough, not much different from the southern part of Canada where I grew up. You know, growing up in southern Manitoba, it's swampy. It's really hot in the summer. We had crayfish in our local canal. My brother and I used to catch them and eat them like as kids, you know, like it's just, I don't know. There's certain elements of where I grew up that Nashville, sort of the South, it feels like home to me in a way. And it's hard to explain to most people are going to go, how is that even possible? You live in Canada. But there's certain elements of it, you know, growing up on a hog farm, we had smoke. My grandpa smoked, you know, all the smoked meat. Like it was just like all these little tiny things that I felt connected to. And again, the people like working with Bobby just really, and the rest of the guys too, like just, there was a real connection. It's hard to explain, but it's like a home away from home in a way, and just kind of helped me find, it has really helped me find and develop myself as an artist and really being true to who I am. And so I would say that's probably the best answer I've got for that.
Now, you said that there's many talented people on this record, and having listened to it, I agree. There's a ton of talent on this record.
Yeah.
But how amazing was it to have the opportunity to work with Muscle Shoals legend Will McFarlane?
I was blown away. We had our songs. We kind of, you know, had an idea of this is what we're going to do. And Bobby said, you know, he brought Will up and he says, you know, I could give Will a call and see if he'd be interested. And I was just kind of like, yeah, that would be amazing. You know, I had watched the Shoals documentary. I guess it came out about 15 years ago. And since the moment I watched it, I was like, Muscle Shoals. I just was so enthralled and intrigued and all these things. So when Bobby mentioned Will, he called him. Will's like, oh yeah, I'll come down. And we did that first session together, and it was just incredible. Will is just an incredible musician, an incredible human being. I really felt like we clicked even in the session, which also led to us writing 2 of the songs on the record together.
Which ones?
We wrote Solid Ground and My Man together.
Okay.
Solid Ground was the first one. It was the day after the very first time I'd met him. We got together and we were just talking about the world and all these things. And, you know, it's crazy, right? I mean, he's in his early 70s, and there's just such wisdom in him and wit. And it's crazy because I think no matter where you are or where you're coming from in terms of your life experience and their life experience, we wrote that song in probably 90 minutes. Like, it just kind of came together. And it was so funny as he heading out the door. He says, well, that sure wasn't a waste of anyone's time, was it? And I'm like, well, it wasn't a waste of mine. So as long as it wasn't a waste of yours, we're good. And then I came back for another group of sessions, like another recording session a couple months later. So with My Man, I wanted to write a song kind of for my husband. I wanted to kind of like write something sassy, and I wanted, you know, but I can't really write it with my husband because that's weird. But Will had met him. And so I was like, who could I write a song for my husband with? I'm like, Will, he would be great. And so I reached out to him, and he's like, yeah, I'll totally write with you. So I was in Nashville. I drove down to Muscle Shoals. Will was doing a session at Fame Studios that day. He says, well, just come. I'm doing a session. Just come down here. We'll meet at the studio. And we did. He wasn't quite finished his session, so I just sat in and I kind of watched him do his thing, which is always a magical thing, watching these guys do their thing. And then after the session, he's like, okay, let me see if I can find a room. There's rooms up here we can write in. You know, we head up the stairs, and lo and behold, we walk into Rick Hall's office. He's like, yeah, let's just write in here. I'm like, okay. You know, like I'm sitting there going, what? And yeah, same, you know, this song as well. I mean, there was a portion of the song that was kind of in my head, and that's what I came into the session with. And Will kind of helped me articulate it, but also just the feel of it. My husband's a huge lover of the band, and I feel like that song has a bit of that feel, you know, with some of the way that we recorded it. It was a fun song to record.
Well, let me go ahead and read to you verbatim the next question I was going to ask. Mm-hmm. Track number 8 is called My Man. Who's this about?
Well, it's about my husband.
Oh, cool. What's his name?
His name's Cor.
Did you say Cor?
It's short for Cornelius. So that's his full name, Cornelius.
Like the rooster?
No, yeah, I guess so. Also Cornelius in like, what's that Christmas movie? Anyways, yeah, Cornelius with a K. Yes, that's my husband's name. We've been together 25 years, and it's been quite a ride. Life has thrown us lots of different curveballs, but he's a good guy. Like I said earlier, been an incredible support. Really appreciate that. And also just fun, you know. He's a lot of fun when you've been with someone for a long time and you've been through ups and downs, because we've certainly had our downs for sure. It was fun to write a song that kind of celebrates who he is in a bit of a sassy way.
Well, this is going to sound like a huge ask, because it is a huge ask. Ollie, can I play that song?
Sure.
Can I play My Man off your second album, Nowhere to Hide, in this episode?
Sure. Yeah.
Will you do me a favor?
Uh-huh.
Down here in the United States, as it were, as it used to be called. We used to have these things called radio DJs, and they would introduce songs. Will you introduce this song like you're a Canadian radio DJ?
Sure. This is Ollee Owens, and you're listening to the song My Man from my brand new album called Nowhere to Hide.
My man, he's one determination, he's sure to let you know he will be there for you, no matter how things go. With his determination, there's no mountain he can climb. And he makes me so happy, I'm proud to know he's mine. My man, he ain't just talk. My man, he's walking the walk, giving up himself in every way he can. Lord, I just can't help but love my man. When he walks in the door, I greet him with a smile, take him in my arms, make it worth his while. My man, he ain't just talk. My man, he's walking the walk, giving up himself in every way he can. Lord, I just can't help but love my man. He's giving up himself in every way he can. Lord, I just can't help but love my man. I love you, baby.
Ollie, tell me, what are the plans for 2024 and 2025 with this album, Nowhere to Hide? Are you going to tour it? Are you going to get it on all the playlists or whatever the kids are doing these days? What are we doing with this album?
Well, we've got a fantastic team working to get the album out there currently. So it is being played on radio internationally in the US, in Canada, in Europe, Australia, and South America. So I'm really happy that, the songs are getting out there in that regard. We've had some wonderful reviews come in from various outlets. And so that's been exciting just to see how well received it has been so far. In terms of getting out there and playing it, yes, we've started off here. We had a couple of album release shows up in Canada, and then the plan is to tour in 2025 across Canada. The plan is to go down into the US and do some touring down there as well. Just getting out there as much as we can, wherever we can, to be with people and, make those connections. Oftentimes I get feedback that experiencing the whole live show, people are always a little, wow, I really like your music. And then you came here and you were live, and so for me, the goal is to get out there as much as I can and play these songs face to face. That's the goal. Yeah. And so I'm really thankful for the team that we have here helping us out with that. Can't wait to come to a town or city near you.
I have heard your live performances described as even more passionate and full of energy than the album, which I'm finding hard to believe because this album is chock full of energy and passion.
Mm.
What's the biggest hit on the album so far? It's being played in multiple countries around the world. What's the hit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the songs that seem to be, I'm seeing as I'm looking back, because a lot of these stations will report back. I would say kind of the top songs right now so far would be Nowhere to Hide, Some Days, Roots, Lord Protect My Child. Those are kind of the, top 4 or 5. Love You Better is showing up. But yeah, those are kind of the top ones. And Solid Ground. Solid Ground is another one that's being played quite a bit as well. And so, yeah, it's nice because it's not just one song, but there's like numerous songs that people, just depending on what they're into that day and what they feel will work with their listeners. But yeah, it's pretty cool to see that there's multiple songs that people are resonating with.
I love that.
In terms of the energy, This album was recorded Muscle Shoals style. So all the guys were in the room together. Maybe not as typical these days. A lot of times people will record remotely and stitch it all together. This record was not that way at all. And we did that on purpose because we wanted that feel. We wanted it to feel live in the moment. And we wanted to capture as much of that energy as possible. So I'm really happy that you noted that, because that was one of our goals in making this record. We wanted to feel that.
Well, it really does come across. Everybody around the world who's listening to this episode, check out My Man, because it's not one of the ones that she mentioned as being one of the more popular ones, but My Money says this is the best song on the album. I love it so much. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm just imagining my wife's lips move while she's singing about me, but whatever. It's cool.
That's awesome.
This is not about me. It's not about me.
Yeah.
When you tour in 2025 or beyond, well, come down here to South Texas. Austin, they call that Music City. I'm not far from there.
Yes. And that is one of my bucket lists for sure, to get down that far, for sure. There's a few places down there I really would like to get to, and that's one of them. So, yes.
Fantastic. Well, when that happens, holler at a fat kid, and I will come out there and see you and things.
Oh, good.
Ollee Owens, tell everybody where they can find you on social media. Where can they find out more about what you're doing and maybe some future tour dates and things?
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram. It's Ollee Owens, Ollee with 2 E's, Ollee Owens, Owens. Also on the website, same tag, olleeowens.com. And I post updates on touring, updates on new releases, all the things. That's probably the best spot to find me these days.
Are there any plans for you to do a music video with any of the songs where it's just you and the night sky when they're doing the Northern Lights things? Just you singing and playing your guitar in front of the Northern Lights. Do that. That sounds awesome. I'm in.
You know what? That's a fantastic idea. I'm going to do that. Speaking of music videos, we do have a brand new video coming out, I think pretty quick, with the Nowhere to Hide video. And we do have a couple of other videos online. But I love the idea of the Northern Lights, and I'm going to definitely do that.
I think it would be super easy to do, right? Like you don't have to hire a whole bunch of people, just somebody with a camera, and kind of that's it.
Yeah, I'll just take my daughter with me, because they always tell us it's going to be a big night tonight. And we'll just drive out to the middle of wherever and get that for sure, because they are beautiful. That's for sure.
I think that'd be awesome. Plus, I mean, it's distinctly Canadian, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I think that'd be super rad. Ollee, as we're heading out, is there anything I didn't ask you or we didn't talk about today that you specifically wanted to talk about? Like, did we hit the big bits?
Oh, yeah.
That was the most Canadian you've sounded this whole time. It was almost North Dakota. You're like, oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I love it. It was wonderful to chat with you today, Steve. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be able to chat with folks about the album and about the journey to get here. I just hope everyone enjoys what they hear, and a song or two on this record will mean something special to them. You know, we had a lot of fun making it, and I just hope y'all enjoy it.
Well, I love that you said y'all, because that is a very American South word. So I appreciate that. Everybody, you did get to hear My Man earlier, but make sure you go back and check out the rest of the album. Again, this album, Nowhere to Hide, brand new album. It is dope as heck. Everybody go check it out. Go to olleeowens.com, and can you buy the album there? Is that a thing?
Yes, we have CDs, but we also have limited edition vinyl on the website. So you can get it on nice little, beautiful, crackly vinyl. Yeah, so we have that available on the website, olleeowens.com. Ollee with 2 E's.
2 L's, 2 E's.
2 L's, 2 E's. Yeah, Ollee.
Are there digital versions that people can purchase? Like if somebody wanted to buy MP3s, could they just download the album? Is that a thing?
Yes. Well, it's on all the streaming platforms. So
yeah, no, but you don't get any money if somebody's listening to it on Spotify.
Right. We'll have to update it with maybe like a Bandcamp sort of idea. I think Bandcamp is more direct for the MP3s, I think.
Put it somewhere, because I can't tell you how many people I run into who, they're taking a cross-country trip and If you're driving across a lot of America, you can't stream anything because you don't have a signal.
Right.
But if people purchase the music, then it's on their phone. They can listen to it wherever they want, whenever they want.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll put an option in there for sure.
That's what I would do. I mean, that's just me. What do I know? Shoot. Hey.
No, man, that's good. That's good. There's always something to learn every day. That's a great suggestion.
On that note, Ollee Owens, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day and your hectic singing and songwriting schedule to hang out and let us get to know you a little bit better on Fascination Street. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It was 100% my pleasure, and you have a great rest of your week.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Opening music is the song FSP Theme, written, performed, and provided by Ambush Vin. Closing music is from the song Say My Name off the 2021 album Underdog Anthems, used with permission from Jax Hollow. If you like the show, tell a friend. Subscribe and rate and review the show on iTunes and wherever else you download podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. All the episodes are available there as well. Check me out on Vero at Fascination Street Pod and TikTok at Fascination Street Pod. And again, thanks for listening.